Hello everyone and welcome to my third of 3 videos on the Sony A300, right there. So in the first video we talked about what everything on the camera is, and the second we did a complete operational walkthrough. In this video we're going to focus on the menus, okay? So real quickly to get into the menus, just hit all you have to do is hit the menu button right there. Okay, now the way that these are laid out is along the top there are different tabs. Each tab group has a different sub-tab. So these are the recording menu, tabs 1 and 2, custom menu has 1 tab, playback menu has 2 tabs, and then the setup menu has 3 tabs. Okay, so if you're looking for a specific item, just look in the video description for links to each of these tabs, and that'll get you pretty close. So what we're going to do is, then to navigate, by the way, there's the control pad on the back here. If you hit left and right, you can go through the tabs, and if you hit down, you can enter the tabs, and if you hit the center button, the AF or OK button as it's often called, that will take you into the item, and then you can navigate then to make adjustments. And let's get back to the very first. There we go. All right, we're going to start off in the recording menu with aspect ratio. So aspect ratio gives you 2 options, 3:2 and 16:9. 16 by 9 crops a little bit off the top and the bottom of your image. 3:2 is the full sensor. So unless you are going to be taking stills strictly for use in 16 by 9 format video or to create desktop wallpapers or something like that, leave it in 3:2. You can always crop stuff you don't need. You can never get it back. And quite honestly, even if you plan on cropping everything down to 16 by 9, if you keep it at 3:2, you can always go back and crop later. The next item is the quality item. And this is basically your type of file. RAW, RAW plus JPEG, fine JPEG, and standard JPEG. Oh, you know what I did? I skipped the image size. Let's go back here, select fine. And now you can see image size reappears, okay? Image size is the size of the image when you're using a JPEG. So you have to have JPEG selected for this to show up. 10 megapixels, 5, and 2, okay? Well, this downsamples from your image. So if you downsample, you never get that resolution back. So memory is pretty cheap today. If you're gonna shoot JPEGs, which realistically, if you wanna learn to be a better photographer, you should shoot RAW. But if you're gonna shoot JPEGs, leave it in large. Okay, talked about aspect ratio. Now we come down here to quality, and you've got fine JPEG or standard JPEG. With this camera, with a 16 gigabyte CF card, a fine JPEG at full 10 megapixels, you can fit about 3,500 of those on a single 16 gig CF card. So it's even more standard, right? So realistically, memory is cheap. You don't need to shoot JPEG unless you are strictly required to for some reason. RAW plus JPEG shoots a RAW file and a JPEG file. This was useful back in 2008 or 2009, back when people were using versions of Windows like Windows 7 and older. Windows 10 and newer, at least Windows 10 and 11 as of late 2024, can display thumbnails for most RAW file formats. Old Windows could not display thumbnails for any RAW file format, okay? So if you're going to shoot RAW, you don't need to shoot JPEG. That'll just eat up memory card space you don't need to have eaten up. So RAW will allow you to just shoot RAW, and as long as you're on Windows 10 and newer, you should be able to see a thumbnail from that. Creative style, standard, vivid, bunch of others, okay? If you're going to shoot RAW, just leave it on standard, because all of these changes in here you can make with way more control and accuracy in editing your RAW files. But I'm going to show you standard here has these 3 symbols down here. I'm going to hit the right crosspad, contrast, saturation, sharpness. You can increase or decrease any of those. And that's true for most, if not all of these, until we get to black and white, okay? So if you're shooting standard and you just feel like, I don't like the shadows, they're not dark enough. Well, you can come in here and increase the contrast, and that'll darken up your shadows a bit, okay? But standard, any of these tonings that you make here, once you make them, you don't get to go back to the standard file. Vivid looks kind of like old slide film. Rich and saturated colors, dark shadows, things like that. Portrait, color tones for portrait photos. If you do want to use this for a portrait photo, One thing you can do is come in here to your sharpness and crank it down a little bit, and then that will give your portrait subjects perhaps a bit more of a flattering image, because a softer image will hide skin blemishes. This is landscape. Camera's going to tone your images for landscape photos. Nighttime photos, same thing, adjustments for nighttime. This is sunset photos. It's going to bump up your color, saturation, and contrast for dramatic sunsets. In black and white, you can see the saturation here disappeared in the middle, and that's because you cannot get any more unsaturated than black and white. But you can still adjust contrast and sharpness, and that turns your images to black and white. Adobe Plus is basically using the Adobe RGB space for your images instead of standard. Unless you are very, very into the Adobe ecosystem, just don't use this. Don't use Adobe for your images because it can create some conflicts with non-Adobe products. So only use that if you have to use Adobe. And then we're back to standard. Next up is flash control, ADI flash or TTL. Okay, so Sony cameras come with this thing called ADI, which dates back to Minolta cameras. And I think it's advanced direct something. I always forget what the I stands for. And what this does, if you have a D lens connected to your camera, the D lens can provide information back to your camera and flash. You need a D lens and an IISO flash on your hot shoe. If you have both of those, the D lens can communicate with the flash and give it information to facilitate proper flash exposure. If you don't have a D lens, or if you don't have an IISO flash, if you're using an adapter to use just a basic flash, then you want to use pre-flash TTL, okay? Because ADI only works with D lenses. Pre-flash uses data from a pre-flash burst to calculate exposure, and it can be tricked by reflective surfaces. So one of the things is, if you have like a chrome bumper of a vintage car in your photo, the pre-flash will send out a burst of light that will catch on that chrome, go back to your camera, and trick it into giving you a different flash exposure than you need, probably less light than you need. ADI is smarter than that, and so if you have that IISO flash and a D lens, you can use that and get some better flash results, okay? Flash compensation right here. This allows you to overclock and underclock your flash. If you want to, you can add more light to what's coming out of your flash. Or if you want, you can take away light and have a dimmer flash. So this gives you some creative control and power over your flash, in addition to any controls that are on the flash unit. So we'll go on now to the second tab. And the first item is autofocus priority. With autofocus priority, you have two options, focus or release. It says AF, but it's focus achievement. What is more important to you when you take a photo? Getting the correct thing in focus, or at least something in focus, or just taking a photo? This lower one exists for like reporters and journalists for whom it was more important to get a photo than to have a photo that necessarily had the best or most precise focus, okay? So for most people, having focus priority is probably going to make them happier. That's the way I set it up. But this is largely a function of, do you want your camera to prioritize getting focus or to prioritize taking a photo? And it's up to you. Autofocus illumination is auto or off. Auto means that if it is dark where you're taking a photo, the autofocus illumination will, the light on the front of the camera will light up. And then that will assist the autofocus in achieving correct focus. It can be annoying in some situations, like your kid's spring musical or something, right? So off would disable that. This is largely a factor of personal preference and where you're taking the photos, whether or not you want that to be on. Long exposure and high ISO noise reduction are two things that work in very similar manners. Long exposure turns on or off, and high ISO turns on or off. They have to do with whether you're taking a photo that's a long exposure. I don't recall what constitutes a long exposure with this camera. High ISO goes into effect when you're using high ISO numbers. I, again, don't remember the cutoff for this. It's probably 800 and up. Basically, the way I believe both of these work is by taking a second photo and then comparing the noise profile of both photos to eliminate noise. You do need like a tripod for that. And if you're trying to do star trails with a long exposure noise reduction turned on, you're going to have large gaps between each of your star trails photos. But at any rate, this I always leave to off because long exposure noise reduction, you can reduce noise with modern softwares, including modern free softwares, better than anything in this camera, okay? The algorithms in it are 16 years old. Free software today is better than that. High ISO noise reduction I leave off because you can do noise reduction in post. And also if you're going to shoot high ISO, it's worth it to just kind of embrace the look as well. Record mode reset allows you to reset all of the functions in the recording mode. We're going to the custom menu first. This is your iStart autofocus. Okay, on or off. If you remember the sensors underneath the viewfinder right here, on means that when you put your eye up to them, autofocus will commence. You don't have to half press your shutter button. Off means that they will turn off. You might also remember it a few times in the other videos where I'd move the pen in front of the sensors and the screen would turn off. This also has to do with that, okay? So this is basically turning those sensors on or off so they do or don't do their thing. Auto exposure lock button. If you remember the AEL button up here from, which one is it? This one, I think, from the first and second video, and I pushed it and then I had to hold it to get the asterisk to show up. This is auto exposure lock, hold, or toggle. With hold, you have to hold that AEL button down the entire time that you want to have the camera remember your exposure settings. With toggle, it's on or off. It's like a light switch. You press it once and it remembers, you press it a second time and it forgets it, okay? So this is just a matter of personal preference and how you want that auto exposure lock button to work. If you never use it, this doesn't matter at all. Control dial setup, shutter speed or aperture. So on the front of the camera, you might remember the control dial up here. And when we talked about using full manual mode, if I rotated it, it adjusted the shutter speed. And then if I held the exposure value compensation button down and rotated it, then the aperture number changed. This is where you can change that. If you would prefer the front dial to control the aperture, then select this, and now the front dial will control the aperture, and then the exposure value compensation button will be adjusted, will adjust the shutter speed with the front dial. So that's a matter of personal preference and what you want the front dial to do. Red eye reduction is off or on. When you use a flash, do you want the flash to pulse prior to taking your photo? If so, leave it to on. If not, leave it to off. If you're using the flash on top of the camera or another flash pointing toward your subject, it's a good idea to have that to on, and the pulsing of the flash before the flash fires will cause people's pupils to shrink, which will reduce the appearance of red eye in your photos. Auto review, off to 5 or 10 seconds. Means that after you take a photo, it will not display on the LCD. These times mean that it will, and for how long. This is a huge battery drain, so if you leave this to off, you'll get more battery life out of your camera. Also, if you're here to become a better photographer with this camera, stop relying on looking at photos right after they're taken, okay? If you have a very important one, sure, look at it. But by and large, don't look at them until you get home. That will teach you to be a better photographer because if you make mistakes, you'll learn. Auto off with viewfinder, basically on or off. This refers to the LCD screen when you put your eye up to the viewfinder. With on, this is very confusing. With on, when you put your eye up to the viewfinder, the LCD screen will turn off. The capability to turn off the viewfinder when you put your eye up to the capability to turn off the LCD when you put your eye to the viewfinder is turned on. If you turn this to off, the LCD screen will always be on, even when your eye is right up at the viewfinder, which can be very distracting because you'll have something very bright right underneath your eye. I recommend leaving that to on so that the viewfinder will turn off when your eye is, or the LCD rather, will turn off when your eye is at the viewfinder. But it's really a matter of personal preference and how you want your camera to behave. Next up, we're going to go into the 2 playback menus. I do not have a CF card with photos mounted in here. So these are all except for one of these items are going to be grayed out, but we'll talk about what they are. Delete will allow you to delete photos, folders, things like that. Formats your CF card. Protect will let you protect individual images so they can't be deleted. DOPF is direct print something, and DPOF rather. This is basically how you set up your camera to print photos from a printer directly from it. That's something I have never once done. I've never printed photos directly from a camera, so I'm not going to be the guy to tell you all of these functions and what they work and how they work, but that's what it is for. And underneath that, you have date imprint and what's the other one? Index print. So date imprint, I believe, allows you to print the date onto your images, and an index print is a large group of photos that are printed small on a single page. So you can look at, say, however many, 10, 20 photos are on that page and decide which ones you want to print full size. Going into Playback menu 2, our one option that we can get into here is called Playback Display, and the options are Auto Rotate or Manual Rotate. With Auto Rotate, if you take a portrait orientation photo, okay, where the top of the photo's here, the bottom's down here, then it will display upright with black letterboxing on each side of the LCD screen when you play your images back. With Manual Rotate, you have to manually rotate the camera, but your portrait orientation photos will take up the entire LCD screen. It's just a matter of personal preference and how you want your camera to behave. Next up, we have the slideshow, which allows you to enter a slideshow, start playing back images and for people to see, and interval, which is the time that you can set for each photo to play. Next up, we have the setup menu. The first item in the setup menu is LCD brightness, okay? I have it cranked all the way up to 2 because it makes recording these videos a little bit easier, but if you're inside someplace dark, you might want to dial it down a bunch. So this setting is just a matter of personal preference and how bright you want your LCD to be. If you're outside in full sun, +2 is probably a good idea. Next up, we have information display time. How long does information display on your screen when you have done something? 1 minute down to 5 seconds. This is just a matter of personal preference and how long you want things to be on your screen when you're done with them. Power save, 30, 10, 5, 3, or 1 minutes. How long do you want your camera to stay on after you pushed a button? This is strictly a matter of battery preservation. I usually do 5, sometimes with some cameras I'll do 10, but 5's a good number, right? 1's a little bit too short, quite frankly. 3 is kind of maybe probably fine. I only use 30 for these videos because it's really annoying to have these cameras turning themselves off while I start, rattling on about something. But that's what this does. After you stop pressing a button, how long until the camera self turns off? Video output, if you remember the video port from the side of the camera over here next to the CF card, this is the output for it, NTSC or PAL, so that when you connect it to a TV to do a slideshow, for instance, are you connecting it to an NTSC or PAL TV? This is strictly what part of the world you're in. Language selection, English, French, Spanish, Italian, pretty sure that's Japanese, and then Chinese as the other options. Just a matter of what language do you want your menu displayed in. Date time setup, you can come in here and select your date and time. You can see when this camera was released because that is, that's when it was released, 2008. You can scroll through here, set your date and time, and also the format that you want your date and time presented in. We're going to come in here to setup menu number 2. The first option is file numbering. Continuous, serial, or reset. Basically, serial starts at 0001, goes on through 9999. And reset, you can manually reset the numbering on your files to 0001. So that's what that's for. Folder names, standard or date format. Usually I go with date format because with date format, the camera will create a new folder every day. It just makes it a bit easier to keep track of the photos that you take. Standard format, I believe that it will just keep filling up that folder until it reaches whatever number of files it can put into it, regardless of whether they were all taken today or yesterday. Now, if you only take 2-3 photos a day, it might make more sense to have it in standard format. But if you're going out and taking 30, 50, 100 photos in a day, you probably want it in date format. Underneath here, we see 2 others, select folder and new folder. Those are grayed out because I don't have a CF card in the camera right now. Select folder, if you have multiple photos, you can select which folder you want the photos to be saved to. New folder lets you create a new folder. So there are a couple of good uses here. Let's say that you got this camera for a photo class and you've got 2 assignments you've got to do in the next few days. You can create a folder that says assignment 1 and another one that says assignment 2. When you go out to do your assignment 1 photos, select assignment 1. save all your photos to the Assignment 1 folder. Then when you're done with that, you're going to start Assignment 2 photos, select the Assignment 2 photos, and start saving your files there. That way you know when you get back to your computer which files were for which assignments. USB control connection, mass storage, or peer-to-peer. If you're going to connect your camera to a computer via the USB port up there, is it a mass storage device or a peer-to-peer device? Strictly a matter of what you need it to do to communicate with your computer, but quite frankly, this is an old USB connection on this. You're going to be able to transfer files from your CF card using a CF card reader way faster than straight off of this camera. Audio signal, on or off. Do you want your audio signal to your camera to beep when things happen, like it obtains focus or something? If yes, turn that to on. If you want your camera to be quiet all the time, turn it to off. Setup menu 3 includes pixel mapping, which it's not going to let me do for reasons I don't understand. Could just be because the battery is at like 60% right now. What pixel mapping will do is run a software program that checks the sensor for dead pixels, and then if it finds them, the camera will then use software to extrapolate what those pixels should look like and what color they should be. And then you won't have like bright red or bright yellow, bright blue pixels on your images. That's what a hot or a dead pixel looks like. So with this, you can map your pixels so that you have to do less image cloning when you get your photos back. Cleaning mode is used for cleaning your image sensor. So if I click OK here and click OK, now what it's going to do is pop up the shutter inside of the camera. Oof. There you can see the sensor at the back there, and the shutter is open. And then what you could do is use like a bulb blaster or a brush to clean the shutter. When you're done cleaning, you power off and just go about your day after that. And our last item in the menu system is reset defaults. This will reset all of the factory defaults so that if you've just, let's say, bought this camera brand new and you want to start off with a clean factory set of settings, come here, reset everything, and then do your configuration. And with that, that is everything about the Sony A300. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in whatever videos come next.